everyone. Welcome to Project Girlhood, the podcast, where we amplify the voices of women by leading solutions-focused discussions. We talk about all things social, cultural, and political, aiming to educate and find solutions for systemic issues. In today's segment, we're focusing on mental health, particularly how young people can break the barriers and drive systemic change. Today, we have youth advocate Juliet, mental health professional Yashal, and Asha, an advocate for disability. Can you guys tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Juliet, and I have lived experience with autism for the past 16 years, as well as a whole host of other mental stuff. And I use my platform as an advocate to help with teacher understandings of autism.
That's really great. Aisha?
Hi, my name is Aisha. Obtain systems so that they prevent harm from future generations of young people.
That's really exciting. Yeah, I mean, you've done a lot, Yashal.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. My name's Yashel. I'm a community facilitator and a mental health advocate. I'm also the founder of Yes Help Network, which is a community organization that I recently founded. And I host community events and school workshops to create safe spaces for young children just to break the stigma around taboo topics such as mental health, domestic family violence, and I'm planning on expanding that. Yeah, mental health awareness is a huge passion of mine. Right now, young people are facing a mental health crisis and depression, anxiety rates are increasing. It just shows how important it is to normalize these conversations and encourage and uplift each other to seek help when we need it.
Yeah, no, for sure. You guys are so incredible. You've done so much work in this space as advocates, as young people within the capacity that you're in. And so all of you as well were at our community forum a couple of days ago on mental health and women's health and just all the barriers and cultural stigmas and everything that we can do to move past that, but also spreading awareness. So before we move on to discussing the solutions and things that we can do as young people to drive systemic change. What do you guys think are some takeaways that you had from the forum? Like, what are some key things that you want audiences to know about before we actually get into solving problems?
Very much from what I saw yesterday, the power of young people's voices. Everyone was speaking, everyone was engaged and speaking up about topics that affected them personally, affected their friends, just affected us as girls together.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And what do you think those sort of topics are? What is something that, there's not enough awareness about or something that we should sort of give a bit of background on before we continue going in about the other things and the solutions to certain things?
I heard people speaking very productively about women's mental health, lack of diagnosis, lack of understanding, and just general misinformation surrounding specifically women's mental health issues.
Yeah.
The power of everyone coming together was quite clear. Overall, the energy was amazing. It was contagious, and it just showed the importance of cultivating spaces like that for girls to come together and to feel safe enough to open up about stuff that we would otherwise not talk about, especially girls from culturally and diverse backgrounds. There's a lot of stigma around talking about mental health. It's
Yeah,
seen
for sure.
as a weakness, or it's just seen as something that's not real. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the idea of mental health being so taboo or just being something that we don't really recognize as a problem, just in general, even in mental well-being, aside from diagnosed issues. You know what I think the issue is? I think people get so caught up in the fact that the stigma was even worse back then, that people didn't talk about it. And now that they are talking about it, it's like these things are new, which I just think it's such a common. It is. I think they're afraid of that cultural shift of people talking more about their ideas and their issues. So what can you guys tell us about, why a woman, especially a neurodivergent woman, been misdiagnosed or even just dismissed in clinical settings or even cultural settings? Julia, I know you have experience with that advocacy.
I was not diagnosed until I was 15. I was showing signs straight out of the womb, basically. But I find that the big thing that left me undiagnosed was the fact that when we stop and we look, we say, okay, what do autistic children look like? We're not asking what autistic children look like. We're asking very specifically, what does a very specific kind of autistic boy look like?
Yeah.
And I had no behavioral issues. In fact, quite the opposite. I had no mental issues at that time. And so I went undiagnosed until I physically couldn't take it anymore and there was very clearly something wrong with me. And from there, I was able to seek help for that. But even after I realized, hey, it's probably the autism, it took me a whole year of quite expensive psychologist sessions to then go on the process to diagnosis, and from there get diagnosed, get it back. And after all that process, I find it's really helped me like understand myself, what's wrong with me, what works, what doesn't. It's a very useful process.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting that you talked about that because you mentioned this experience at our community forum a couple days ago. You were talking about how, I believe it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said that research was modeled after men's brains, which is so crazy to me in the big 25, you know? So what do you think we can do? Obviously, that's a really deeply rooted systemic issue. We can't just fix that. But how do you think people can get support when they're in the situation that you were in? Especially the financial barriers are so insane.
So, men are diagnosed roughly, there are some varying statistics, but for autism specifically, men are diagnosed between like 4 and 6, and women almost double that, 10 to 12,
Oh my,
because it takes us hitting puberty and suddenly not having that whole support network for the cracks to start to show. We're socialized differently. We have different brain structures. We experience things very differently to our male counterparts.
yeah.
So that when it comes to diagnosis, we're looking for the boy at the back of the class who will shake his hand, stand up and run around, or won't engage with teachers, or will be, all these stereotypically autistic things that most of us, not even only females, but most autistic people don't recognize or might not experience in the same way because essentially it's been bullied out of us.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I think
No, continue.
And
That's what we want.
it's so important to emphasize that it's a literal spectrum.
Yeah.
No person is going to have the same set of symptoms, and everyone shows it differently.
And you know what I think? Sorry, I think that creates a lot of stigma as well. It's like, you're not like that person. You don't have these symptoms. Have you guys ever like seen that? Or like, what do you think we can counter that with actually?
100%. I see that in I had symptoms, but my symptoms only affected me. I was in pain. I was having like issues with things. That doesn't affect those around me. And until it started affecting my grades, people were like, that's fine.
No. No.
I think one big like way to help remedy this is teacher education. I've met so many teachers who, when I was showing very, very clear signs, it was overlooked. It wasn't even brought up with my parents. And the fact that teachers didn't know what to look for, and then not only, even if they did know what to look for, they didn't take any action. I might not be grieving my early teenage years where I had no support for these things, or I had no solid proof of what was wrong with me. And I think that whole going through puberty would be 100% easier if I had like the knowledge behind me of what was wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because you guys, I do a lot of work with the Department of Education as a vice chair on the New South Wales Student Council. And every time we meet with the wellbeing team or with a lot of executives, they have really good intentions. They want to help people. They want to help students, especially students with disabilities or students with culturally different backgrounds. But it's interesting to me that they don't know where to do that, or they don't know how to start. What do you guys think they can do? Like people in positions of power, policymakers, how can they actually implement meaningful change for people experiencing mental health issues, especially girls?
Yeah, I guess it's about working with those people with lived experiences
Yeah.
and rather than assuming that they know what they're going through. And it's a tricky one because everyone has their own unique experiences and
Yeah.
it's not a one size fit all. And even if they do, I guess, have a advisory committee, that group can't represent the entire
Yes. Oh my God. I
population.
can't stress this enough. I hate the, we've got like 6 advisory committee, but what are the advisory committees doing? How do you think we can even make advisory
Exactly.
committees meaningful?
I think they need to do outreach programs or, I don't know, come up with a system where they go out into schools, communities, councils. A lot of work that needs to be done, but I guess doing outreach programs in schools, councils, and reaching young people where maybe through social media or anonymously because, yeah, talking about mental health can be scary. Maybe people don't want to share their
For
lived
sure.
experience. So yeah, trying to meet young people where they're at and yeah, trying to get as many voices they can included in whatever policy they're working on.
How do you all think that can be more accessible? If we were to, for example, have people with positions of power or in policy making, go out and do outreach programs, how would we make that accessible in terms of, like, not literally, but in terms of just like speaking about it and having the confidence and the courage to talk? Because I know with your experiences and all of you, I mean, they're all very intimate. They're very, like, they're your personal inner struggle. So how would you go about sharing those with others in an environment that you know, may or may not feel too comfortable in because of the history? So that really relates to making it culturally safe, talking about mental health as a culturally safe thing. How do you think we can do that? Like, if you could redesign an entire section or multiple sections of the mental health system, particularly for young women and for young women that experience things that are constantly overlooked, how would you do that and what would it be?
I'd put more money into free and accessible diagnosis, free and accessible just mental health consultations, because we're Australia, we have Medicare for citizens and it's a great thing, but it means that people fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And when there's no apparent reason to like dump $100 on a singular psych appointment,
Yeah.
you're less likely to put that money into it if you don't think there's an issue. But we're not checked up in the same way medically we are as we are psychologically. Like, we come out of the womb and we're giving medical exams. And then most people don't really see the inside of a psych office until like they're in year 4.
Yeah, and that's if they're identified.
Even our school psychologists, I remember when we first got them in primary school and we had to be of a particular age to refer ourselves to them, which I
Oh.
understand, like, but at the same time, these things aren't built into there are no like yearly screenings for mental health issues, or like, it's just not as funded as other medical stuff.
Yeah, for sure. What do you guys think? I mean, Yashel, especially with your experiences in the mental health space, particularly for culturally diverse women, without the bureaucracy and stuff, how can we make the conversation more easy to have?
I think, again, meeting them where they're at. Maybe therapy is not the thing. For some people, that's maybe not a thing that they think they need. And I think having more access to a safe community place just to connect and uplift each other. Connection is a big thing when it comes to having a positive mental well-being. I
Sure.
think, yeah, more funding towards those spaces where we can have culturally safe space to just be with each other and connect with each other. And for young people, I think that they need to invest more in peer support. When we were talking about policymakers and leaders reaching out to young people to see what they want, instead of them personally doing that, I think it would be much better if they had people with actual lived experience where
Yeah.
young people could actually see themselves in those people. And that would also make
Girlhood
them
shout out.
exactly. We need more girlhood events, new forums, shops going on. Like at the forum, I saw how um, everyone was just like lit up because we could see ourselves in each other, and it was so empowering to be in that space. And I think, yeah, we definitely need more spaces like that.
No, I agree. And isn't that what empowerment's all about? Having that opportunity for everyone to feel comfortable and to speak up about things that we can really drive systemic change in.
And there's so much research and reports into like how to better support young people.
Exactly. But how much of it is
out there.
and I think we've all seen that, especially with, you know, when we write up reports or when we do surveys. I mean, how much of that is actually going towards something? Do you know what I'm saying? So to, you know, sort of bounce off of that, how could we take those policymakers and those reports that we've all had and that we've all participated in and written, how can we better include young women, especially those with neurodivergency and with mental health issues, to include them? And how can we bridge that gap between spreading awareness and actually bringing solutions to life? What do you think?
Well, first of all, we need to get people's input and informed input. So we need group forums, but we need more like intensive ways of getting exactly what young women want and what young women need, and specifically in terms of neurodiversity. When like the autistic group, we're not a very like socially active group on the
Yeah.
whole. Like, there are so many barriers to going to places and doing things. Like, the lights are too bright, the sound is too loud. Not every space we go into is guaranteed to be autism safe. And like,
Yeah.
that is a barrier for entry, because you're less likely to go somewhere where you know you're going to have a headache by the end of the day, even if it might help you 20 years down the track.
Yeah, well, just how do you think we can be autism safe? How can we make our environment safe? What would
yeah.
that involve? Like,
So sensory safe is like low light, small groups, low sound, making sure that there are no unexpected events, like we're not show and tell, printing itineraries and updating people when things change. And also you see it tokenistically, like you were saying before, taken for supermarkets. My local supermarket will have like a autism safe shopping experience, but it's during the school and the work day. So if you're autistic and you do school or you do work or TAFE, or it's not them taking time out of their peak times where they'll most feel the hit in their budget. It's them saying, okay, what's a random corner we can just allot to the disabled?
yeah,
Like
it's not accessible or equitable because,
yeah,
you know,
I've never been in that shop at that time when there is autism, like low lights. You have them in the loads of shopping centers. It's just never at a time when it actually benefits a
yeah.
lot of autistic people.
No, I agree. That sounds awful, actually. Yeah.
Breakout rooms, I know I see that a lot, like with some events, and it's like step away, go into a room where it's like quiet and like once your
Yeah.
social battery runs out.
Yeah, but even with that, I feel like there's such less spaces that actually do that. And when it's usually happening, it's where the people running it are young people or when they're actually led by people with lived experiences. So what do you guys think that we can do in our own individual capacity as advocates and as youth leaders to sort of make those sort of spaces more mainstream? And how can we raise awareness about those sort of issues? Because, you know, it's so bad. Like you go somewhere, you can't access the help that you need. And like you're saying, it's just when you can access it, it's not equitable enough. So,
Listen to disabled people, not disabled people's parents.
oh my God.
Because
Yeah, I saw a form the other day about like they were following up on the whole parliament thing, and it was like a questionnaire about like people with lived experience of this. There was no option for
there are some cases where people may not cannot fill out these forms on their own, and we should make space because basically we should allow for that because not everyone is as high masking or as
Yeah.
able as other people, and we shouldn't put barriers in place for that. But at the same time, we should understand that the next best person to go to about disability is another disabled person.
Yeah.
But like, look, autism hereditary, all our parents have probably got it as well. But at the same time, there are carers out there who are looking after their disabled children and it is not about the child. And so when you ask them questions about like what would be best for your child, and the answer isn't always what's best for your child. And we
Yeah.
say we turn to the parent, we turn to the carer, we turn to the just those around them instead of turning to the person themselves.
So, Yashal, you do a lot of advocacy work in that space, especially with regards to parental carers, everything like that. How do you think that we can make diagnosis, treatment, and processes more accurate and also less dismissive for women, especially women from minority backgrounds or backgrounds where they've got so much family trauma? Even identifying neurodiversity or identifying mental health barriers is just such a big issue in itself.
Yeah, I think where it all starts from
Yeah.
you're finding that courage to actually seek out help. And for that, you need to normalize these conversations around mental health or around other health issues that you may be speaking. So I would highly kind of recommend family members and parents to
Yeah.
educate themselves around mental health and other health struggles that a family member may be experiencing because really when I even look back of my own lived experience when in high school when I was going through mental health struggles or even afterwards, it took a lot of courage. The first step, the first time when I reached out to a psychologist, and I
Yeah.
remember I lied at home and I said that I'm going to the library.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's so much
people say
cultural
that,
stigma
yeah,
that's so common
exactly.
as
And
well.
people say that for other reasons.
Exactly, yeah.
But
But the fact that it happens so much in itself
yeah.
is such a clear
And
indicator.
but now I look back and I was like, damn, I wish I had more support from my family or even from my friends or from my school. Like, I wish it was normalized to actually talk about this stuff. It was something that I kept in me for so long. So I think a huge part of mental health is conversation, and it would be better if we could just all normalize it. And if we see someone shaming or dismissing mental health or other health issues, I think it's important that we should, as advocates, challenge them and reframe the narrative that we currently have in our.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so what you're saying is, the change starts with us as
Yeah.
individuals. I mean, we need to, before we change systems for good, we need to change those ideas within our own lives. Exactly. No, I absolutely agree. And what do you guys think? Like, how can family and friends, and how can we, in our own capacity as individuals and as young women, how can we better support other young women who are struggling but are afraid to seek help or are in the position that a lot of people were, where they have to lie about seeking help, or whether it's just such a big thing in itself to access mental health support? What do you guys think?
Educate yourselves.
But how?
Go out and spend an hour on Google. Research if your friend comes to you or you suspect your friend of having like a possible, like something's not right. You educate yourself and then you ask questions. You look up, how can I help this person?
There's so much information there.
Yeah, it's not a lack of
Not a secret.
information.
It's a lack
Yeah,
of- it's out there.
absolutely.
It's a lack of
Yeah.
narrow.
It's not a
I think
secret.
we everybody needs to be curious as well, rather
Yeah,
than
for
doing it
sure.
yourself. Just try to be notice little changes. Maybe ask some questions about how have they been sleeping lately, or how have they been feeling.
They shouldn't be such a barrier within themselves. And it's so right what you're saying about everything in terms of, catching up with our friends or just asking people how they are. Because I feel like those micro things, they really add up. And it can definitely change the trajectory of someone's life. But those are a lot of really good solutions focused ideas. And that's what Project Girlhood is all about, which actually brings us, yeah, woo! And that actually brings us to a conclusion for this segment. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope to have you on soon again. Continue doing the advocacy work you're doing and keep attending Girlhood's forums. We do a lot of advocacy work and we empower others by giving them that awareness. So thank you all again. And we hope to see you next time.
Thank-